what's interesting today is particularly is there's been a real rediscovery of this genre. When you see 18 or 20-year-olds or 30-year-old people listening to this or picking up and listening to Tony Bennett, Lady Gaga, or Bublé, or Harry Connick Jr., why? It's hard to say. What's even more interesting to me is people of my generation, the boomer generation. Look, we knew about the Great American Songbook growing up. Without question, we knew about it. Our parents listened to it. I admit that that's how I got hooked from what my mom was playing. You make me feel so young. You make me feel there were songs to be sung, bells to be rung, and a wonderful fling to be flung. Yeah, it's very interesting these days when I'll do a gig. A lot of the people that come are in their maybe 40s and 50s, and maybe 60s and so forth. Boomers. And why are they there? Because they've rediscovered these beautiful stories. They want to hear these stories. They need to hear these stories. It answers things for them. The score has got to really move me, maybe move me even to get that lump in my throat. And if we're gonna swing, well, man, it's got to swing. It's got to go and go and go. So I have to feel like I just want to, get shot off to the moon maybe sometimes if it's going to be that kind of a song. It's all how I connect with the song innately. I hear it, I like it, I go with it. You and I, we are just like a couple of tots running around the meadow, picking up all those forget-me-nots. Really, what I like to hear in the music is I want to be able to know that I really seriously can communicate that story the way I want to do it. And that's what I'm listening to. This music is pure passion. It's just pouring right out of my heart. It just takes me over. There's not a time during the day that there isn't music going through my head. It's that important. Because you make me feel so. I had several conversations with Dan regarding the arrangements that we just laid down. Changes I wanted made in those arrangements because I felt they needed to be done so I could effectively tell the story that I wanted to say and bring the audience to the place where I wanted to bring them.
So an arranger is essentially responsible for putting together the scores that the players are going to play from. So that doesn't necessarily mean deciding every single note that the players are going to play. So you have to really walk a fine line in jazz because I've done some classical composing, and as a classical composer, you will more often have the tendency to write out every part. So if I was to write something for string quartet, I would write what the violinist is going to play note for note and what the violist is going to play note for note, etc. Whereas with jazz, there's much more of a freedom and much more improvisational aspect to what you're doing with the music. So I write out what the players are going to play through the parts where the vocalist is singing for the most part, and I also write out a lot of the what we would call unison horn lines. So things where the horns are all playing together the same thing, or the harmonized horn lines where they're all playing together at the same time, but they're playing interlocking parts that work together. What I will leave open is some of the solos. So for instance, a good example of this is in the middle of the Coffee song. There's a section that's open where there's a saxophone solo and a piano solo. Those sections, I decide what the chord progression in the background is going to be, but then of course the players improvise their own solos over those sections. Another similar example would be in Come Rain or Come Shine, where I would write out what the backing horns are doing and what the backing band is doing, so the bass, drums, guitar, piano, but then the trumpet part is totally improvised, and those guys play, decide what they're going to play. And then sometimes also there's a sort of half and half relationship. So in a lot of the times in the guitar part, I will tell the guitar player what chord I want. So I might say to him, for instance, play a C major chord. That means something to him as a specific chord. But then he decides exactly how he's going to play it, or he might dress that up or ornament that in a certain way. based on what he wants to do. So for the most part, what the arranger does is puts those scores together, distributes those scores then to the band, and then I also sort of put on a different hat and put on a hat as what you might describe as the musical director. And in some bands, that's a separate person. So you'll have an arranger, and then they'll sort of hand it off to the music director, and the music director will then direct the band. And the way that we do it, we have an overlap there. So I'm actually then sort of putting on a different hat and going in, and then I rehearse with the band and sort of take them through the scores, and we tighten things up. And with this band, I didn't have to do a whole heck of a lot of work in that department. These guys were awesome. They really had things together and knew exactly what to do. But what we do is we just sort of tighten everything up, make sure everything's really ready to go before we go into the studio. And then by the time we head into the studio, we're ready to rock. So I'm there in the studio in the same capacity as music director to sort of keep things moving forward, but with a great band like this, that sort of diminishes the need for that. Once I got the parts arranged and got them out to them, they did a really fantastic job with executing everything once we got the ball rolling. So
Steve has been such a pleasure to work with. He's very talented. He's always working at his craft, always improving and always giving 110%. As the producer on this project, it really makes my job fun when such a talented team is put together, and that's exactly what Steve allowed Dan and I to do. With horn players like Steve Yarbrough on saxophone, Nick Borges on trumpet, Ryan Polikoff on trombone, having a rhythm section with Colin Jalbert on drums, Jay Whitbeck on bass, and having John Corda on piano and Dan Thomas on guitar. When Steve and I would work on vocals together, we were able to capture his energy and effectively communicate the stories that he wanted to tell. We're planning some very fun events with Steve to share with as many people as possible his passion for music and the stories from the Great American Songbook. We already have more songs planned to record, so really this is just the beginning for this project. And there's so much more to come, so stay tuned, and I hope to see you at one of the shows.
If I was ever married to any genre of music, it is definitely the Great American Songbook. It really captivated me from a very, very young age. And when I was a little kid, somehow I dug into my mother's 78s. We found this one record, and the artist on that record was Frank Sinatra. And what he was singing was, of all, the coffee song. And it was a silly song. It really, kind of a nonsensical song, a song really about coffee in Brazil. It made me laugh. I just loved it. This music, because it tells these stories about the human condition, about who we are, our emotions, why we love, why we hate, about when our hearts break, about when we have that first love. All that makes us who we are. They were able to write this poetically in verse that makes so much sense to connect with it. They were able to drive right into your heart, right into your soul with these stories. And when I look at my audience, what's so neat about this music, it's so subtle. And so it's never like in your face, graphic. It's communicating on a level so much higher than that. That's what makes this stuff so great. So when you sing this into your audience, you make this grand connection where if you're feeling this love or this lost love or whatever emotion is being evoked during the telling of the story, you know they're getting it too, and you can see in their eyes. It's as if I'm singing to each person in their audience individually and telling them this story. You're the great storyteller. And what the Great American Songbook is stories. It's stories about exactly who we are, what our souls are. Fantastic. It's absolutely fantastic. As a freelance vocalist, as a vocalist, singing the Great American Songbook and communicating this to them, it's probably one of the greatest pleasures that I can experience right now. it allows me to connect with people on this subliminal plane, or however you want to call it. And then you're singing, telling these great stories with these wonderful melodies to these terrific arrangements, and you get a good arranger like I have with Dan, and it's like, God, does it get any better than that? Everyone likes to hear a good story, right? And if it's a story about us, what makes us tick, what makes us love, I mean, what turns us on, what drives us? It's those basic drives to love, to have love, to have sex. All of this is what is in the back of our mind almost all the time. And these songs just they caress these thoughts so well. They just dig right into your soul. So if they haven't heard it, once they hear it, they're gonna love it. And when they hear what we put together, they're gonna really love it.